Welcome to Points to Ponder. My special guest today is my friend, my colleague, and the person with whom I share ministry, ordained ministry at St. Luke's Episcopal Church, Ron Morton. Ron, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm 68 and a half years old, and I'm Indian. I'm also a veteran. I served during the Vietnam War, um, and I've been heavily involved in Native American spirituality for a long time, and still am. And I find at this late stage in my life, it's becoming busier for me that way. Um, which doesn't surprise me because I'm going to have to retire one of these days. And it seems like an Indian country, retirement's the kiss of doom in terms of whether or not you're busy, because then you get involved in the community and there's all kinds of things going on. But I grew up in San Jose, California. My parents originated in Oklahoma. They were both Indian. My dad lived in Seminole County, Oklahoma, growing up. And dad was the more Indian of the two. Um, but what they brought to me early on was a sense of history in terms of being Indian, but a sense of history too in terms of the relationship between Indians and Western Europeans. And so that affected my thinking at an early age, much earlier than I realized later on. And as I grew older, I drifted more in the direction of really understanding what it meant to be an Indian. And you can't understand what it means to be an Indian unless you know the history of your people. And the things that I've learned there are a lot of them. One of the things that I've learned is that the uh, the victors write the history books. The people who are victorious write the history books. And it's always been that way. That's not news to anybody. It's always been that way. And so there's a history that's passed down word of mouth from one generation to the next. And not only are you aware of that history, you have to live with it. You're no longer like your buddy Joey down the street, whose dad is, a middle income banker. I don't know. It's just an example, but you don't fit. And one of the reasons that you don't fit is, I think, because your parents have imbued you with this history and what it means, consciously and unconsciously to be an Indian. And one of those things is the holidays.
Mm-hmm. Which is our point today, focused on the holiday, which happens in the week that this is published, the what we call the Thanksgiving holiday in this country. And the point that we are pondering has to do with the truth about Thanksgiving. This is a part of the whole November series we've been doing on truth and truth as it relates to justice. And a big part of that truth as it relates to justice, I think, is going back and looking at some of these historical narratives and correcting them, to tell the truth about them from the perspective of stories and narratives and histories that have been overlooked. And so today, that is what we've asked you here to do, is to tell us that story, tell us the history, tell us the truth about Thanksgiving.
It's considered a national day of mourning by many tribes, especially those in the Northeast, because they were the ones who were first impacted by the coming of the Western Europeans to the Northeast. And, you know, when I think about Indian people that I know, um, it was that was a time of change. I'm sure the Indian folks there knew it, but they didn't know to what degree until the communities began to spring up. And were created by people who were ill-equipped to survive. You know, they were mostly what we would consider or call blue collar workers that came from Europe. And what we're taught is that they came here for religious freedom, but that's not true because they came from the Netherlands where they had freedom of religion. But there's this mystique that's been built up around, you know, who came here and why they came here. And, you know, I wasn't there. I don't know for sure, but I'm sure it was a shock to Indian people there. But Indian people are also kind of, okay, what next? I mean, that's really the way they are. Indian people adapt. And that meant that they were adapting to the Western Europeans coming to the Northeast. And that would have meant a lot of things. You know, it would have meant that they would have been, you know, wondering what these people believe and what things are important to them. Of course, they'd be thinking about how they could benefit from a relationship with these folks who had come. And one of the things that those folks had was steel. You know, they had metal tools, they had metal rifles, and those were things that Indian people valued. So I think that there was a necessity to develop a relationship. And I believe that that's probably what happened starting out. But then that changed as conflicts arose around land ownership. Indians have never been good with dealing with land issues because Indian people don't believe generally that anyone owns the land. You know, it's something that you can be in charge of, but you don't really own it. You don't own Mother Earth. And so that would have been the beginning of things that happened that resulted in battles and wars between the people who were settling what they, you know, they were settling. They were settling a place that had been settled for thousands of years. And uh, it's no surprise that the folks who were already here resented that. And so, yeah, conflict arose. And there were deaths. There were a lot of deaths. And there were massacres. And around this time, and I was taught this by a friend of mine, Roy Cook. I'm saying his name because he was a guy that I really loved, who was a really bright man. And he wrote um, a paper on Thanksgiving that I can still find on the internet today. And just got to put in Thanksgiving Roy Cook and you'll find it. And Roy talked about things that happened around that time, like a massacre of a huge amount of Wampanoag Indians, and that there was celebration of that amongst the settlers, the people in the colonies, and in Roy's mind, that somehow coincided with this idea that Thanksgiving was equally celebrated by Indians and non-Indians. And I think it's far more likely that what happened was that the Indian people had food and they shared it because that's what Indian people do. They had food, they shared it with these folks. And I don't think they ever regretted it. This is just my personal sense of it. I don't think they ever regretted it, because that's what you do. Now, it's a warrior society. They're going to make war on you if you do the wrong things. You got to expect that from a warrior society. We saw that come up at the second Wounded Knee when the FBI agents were killed. Terrible things happen, um, but it always seems to be based in a conflict between somebody who has the power and somebody who doesn't. And so justice gets skewed. Like justice, is it justice that the federal government is not really interested in investigating the murder of Indian women on reservations or off reservations? A lot of folks don't know about that. I know about it because I'm tied to the community up there. So what is justice? I think that if there were justice, people out there who have a sense of responsibility would want to make it right in some way. And I think that there are plenty of people who do. They just don't really know how to direct their efforts. And but there's a hunger also for the knowledge around that stuff. I'm finding that out with my class, Soul of the Indian. There's a real hunger, I think, to learn more so that you can change. An Indian's idea of civilization is a little bit different. You
Tell
um,
us, tell us that. Explain that.
well, I think Indian people see civilization about how you take care of your family and your tribe because it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's and aside from that, anything that improves the family and the tribe is something that you want to embrace, and those things that don't help, you don't want to embrace, and you call them out. There's a lot of substance abuse on reservations all over the country, but there are also people on the reservations who are calling the tribe out on these things
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and saying, hey, we've got to change. Democracy actually came um, through some discussions Thomas Jefferson had with the Iroquois Confederation in the Northeast. And so Indian people have a sense of democracy, but primarily they rule through consensus.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a long time. So, if I'm working with a group of Indian people and we're dealing with a real critical issue and we're trying to reach consensus, we're not going to probably get that issue done in one meeting.
Mm-hmm.
There might be a number of meetings over a year or 2 years sometimes to try to accomplish something like creating a new association to
Mm-hmm.
represent Indian people. That takes a lot of time
Mm-hmm.
because every tribe and every urban center has a group of Indian people who are trying to live together peacefully while they're at the same time in competition for limited funds, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that Indian people don't necessarily assimilate, and even when they're forced to assimilate, they don't assimilate. In the 1960s, there was a relocation program. The emphasis was to force Indians to assimilate. So they took Indians from all over the country and moved them to urban centers. And the first thing that the Indians did was they got together and created an urban tribe that included Indians from all groups. And they got together to preserve their culture because that's also an Indian thing And the fact that it's been put into practice, and you can see how it happened, has been, I think, a topic of research and discussion for a long time. Indian people need their tribe.
Mm-hmm.
We need our tribe. And so I think there are also a lot of Indians like me of mixed blood who hear their name being called by Indian country.
Mm-hmm. I know that I've got a few friends who are not Indian who have just begun to kind of bump up against these corrections in the narrative. And one of the questions that I've heard from them a lot lately has been what to do with Thanksgiving. Some of them said they feel guilty about even doing anything at all on Thanksgiving, having a meal or getting their family together, and
No,
that maybe
no, no,
they
no,
want
no, no.
things. So, and I know that you don't feel the same way about it, and neither do a lot of the people who are your indigenous brothers and sisters. So, would you talk a little bit about that? What do you do with
No,
Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving is Thanksgiving. Indian people give thanks all the time in everything that they do. You know, if they go out and they cut down a piece of sage, they leave tobacco. It's a way of having a relationship, and you're thanking the creator in that plant for that sacrifice. Thanksgiving. You got to be grateful. You know, Thanksgiving is a day that I'm grateful. This year is going to be a little bit different. You know, I'm going to cook, and then I'm going to haul some meals off to somebody to leave on their doorstep so I don't have to make contact, and then we're all going to Zoom together. That should be fun,
Hmm.
you know? But it's also a way to celebrate your gratitude to the creator. You know, history, okay, history happens, you know, but this is the world we live in. And if we're thankful for what we got, the creator likes that.
Hmm.
I'm really grateful, actually. I have 4 kids of my own, and I got a whole slew of kids and grandkids up in South Dakota by adoption. And, you know, it's only recently when I saw things beginning to get really difficult that I really returned to my roots in South Dakota, not physically, but via Facebook, and said, "Hey, I'm back and I'm going to help." That was a good thing to have happen
Hmm.
because when I left the Sundance, I left as a result of getting old, but also I lost a friend.
Hmm.
And and so I had to deal with that. That takes a long time to get through, you know, and I did finally, and I'm glad I did because you know my close friend, my close brother Verdell died this week, and he and I had
Hmm.
made connection, you know, and
Hmm.
I'm glad of that. But you know, it's we want to strive for a state of mind where we still think good things can happen.
Hmm.
I believe that. I believe that. You know, but I think there's a lot of folks out there who are saying, "Oh, wow, you know, this world sucks." Okay, fix it.
Any last
Fix-
word to as we wrap up?
God bless everybody. You know, if you know me, then you know I love you. You know, I don't say it a lot, probably, but I do. So, God bless everybody.
Thank you, Ron.
Sure.